For this video, I'm going to give you the first step in creating your tree model, the tree sculpt specifically. And what we're going to be doing here is starting off with actually a single vertex. In order to get that single vertex, I need to start with some object. It actually doesn't matter because I'm going to be basically converting it to a single vertex. If I go to the Add menu, go to the Mesh submenu, and you can actually add in pretty much any of these. Well, let's keep it simple and just add in plane. Great. Now that I got this plane, I'm going to tab to go into edit mode. Now, edit mode is just like component selection. You can see right now I can select vertices. Okay. If I hit tab again, it just brings me back out to object mode. But again, in edit mode, you can actually select vertices. You can see these tiny buttons up here: vertex select, edge, face, or you can type 1, 2, 3 to go between them. But we want to be in one or vertex selection. I select all 4 verts of this plane. I'm going to hit M. This brings up a little pop-up menu. M is in merge, and we want to merge at center. And that's what I meant. So regardless of how many verts you might have had for your original object, we're just converting this to a single vertex. I know it's weird, but this is going to become our whole tree. Now remember, we're still in edit mode, so hit tab again. You'll notice it changes. You'll see these things disappear. You'll know that we're out in object mode. It's a little hard to tell since it's just a single vert. Now with this single vert selected, we want to add in a couple of things called modifiers. You can find that on the bottom right panel here. You should see a little icon towards the middle called modifier properties. It looks like a wrench. Select that tab. And then here you'll see a little drop down menu up at the top, add modifier. We're going to add in 2 modifiers. The first thing we're going to add in this second column is something called a skin modifier. And you're going to notice it just brings up basically a cube. And that is actually a modifier that's basically giving thickness or substance to your single vert. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn on smooth shading for this. It's going to look weird for now because it's kind of like smoothing all the edges or softening the edges on a cube. Okay. But this will start to look a little better once we make this a little more rounded. Now let's add a second modifier to this stack. So far we got the skin modifier. If you want, you can collapse its settings just to sort of tidy things up a little bit, just to see a little bit better. I'm going to go to add modifier, and we're going to add what's called a subdivision surface modifier. It's actually in the same second column. And all this is very similar to smoothing in Maya. It's just creating quadruple the number of faces, and it's collapsing and rounding them. Okay. Now, if you like, you may want to bump up the number of subdivisions so this looks a little more rounded with more polygons. If I click on this first slider, you can actually either just enter in a number, or you can just click on the little arrow to the right. That'll increase the number of levels in the viewport. So now you can see we're getting a more rounded thing. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the front view. You can actually hit the tilde key. That's a little squiggly on the top left of your keyboard to bring up a little pie menu for showing viewports. And I'm going to show my front view. Okay. I'm going to push this down a little bit, and this is going to be the base of my trunk. So again, just navigating and moving my view, zooming out so that the base of the trunk is down near the bottom, so I have space to go upwards to create the trunk. So now that I've done that, I'm going to hit tab again. Remember, this was your hotkey to go back and forth into edit mode. And I just want to remind you, there really is just a single vert there. What we're looking at is basically modifications to it to start to generate geometry or more complex geometry from that single vertex. Now, I'm actually going to, just so you see what's happening under the hood here, I'm going to click on these little monitors besides those. All they do is they just hide those modifiers. So again, we have a single vert there, and what I'm going to do is start extruding that vert. This is something that you can't do in Maya so much, which I think you can extrude edges and faces but not verts. But here, watch this. If I hit E and let go, and then just move my cursor, you're going to see a new vert appearing, and you're going to see that it actually creates an edge between the verts. So if I hit E and then drag, E and then drag, you can see it's just creating this zigzag of edges. There's nothing really to this. You can see this is just what it looks like in 3D, but it's just a bunch of edges. There's not any thickness or anything to it. Except if we show these two again, you start to see that in fact, it's creating all that extra thickness or geometry based off of the initial vertex, which in turn becomes edges. So basically what you're doing is you're creating this kind of armature to create all these parts. So again, I can hit tilde and then go to the right, or I'm going to go to the front view. Now you may find it nice to turn on what's called X-ray view to see both the geometry as well as the verts and edges underneath. That's where way up here you see this little icon. And now you can see it's much easier to see those verts as well. And what's great is I can start manipulating this. If I select this, then I can say go to the move tool, start moving this around, and you can see how you can just do this great thing where you can edit all these and reshape this whole thing. Okay. Now another thing we can do here is we can hit Control A and let go. And this actually allows you to scale. It's kind of weird. You're scaling vertices. But what's really happening is you can see it's Control A each time, scaling the actual thickness of the geometry around it. And hopefully you're getting a sense of how you can use this whole technique to block out an entire tree. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just delete all those vertices. Just keep the first one. I'm going to hit X and delete vertices. And so you can see I'm back to that first one. So now I'm going to do this in a more kind of controlled manner, where I'm going to start by creating my trunk. So I'm going to hit E again. Remember, this starts to extrude. Now you'll notice if I start pulling this outwards, it's giving me a lack of control, and I may need to do this one more time since I was deleting. I'm going to do a bunch of undos actually, because there's something funny that sort of happens when I try and delete vertices. So I'm just going to undo. Oh, I'm not sure I can undo. Let me just try. No, see, it's merging, deleting. It's got some funny business. So I'm going to actually, sorry about all that. If you want to just not do those extra verts, I'm just going to go ahead and quickly Shift A. I went back to object mode and deleted that. So add, mesh, plane, tab into edit mode, M to merge its center, tab back into object mode, add two modifiers. I'm doing it much faster now. Skin, smooth, collapse, subdivision surface, add in an extra subdivision. Now we're good to go. All right, so back to my front view. Tab into edit mode. All right, so this is where I really wanted to be, was just with a single vert. E, and you'll notice now it's working fine, but instead of pulling it to some random spot, I'm going to try and pull it straight up. Now, if I really want to be precise, I can constrain to the vertical axis. And the way I can do that, actually, Blender swaps the Y and the Z axis just to confuse you. So Z is actually up. So if I'm not pressing anything now. I'm just moving my cursor around. If I hit Z and let go of Z, now when I pull up and down, you see how it's constraining it. So I can say go up here and create the height of the trunk. Great. Now I can go further. Maybe I'll just Control A down here just to create a little bit of a taper. In other words, it's a little wider at the base than up near the top of the trunk. So now remember, this is a vertex up here. I can again E to extrude, and now you can see I can start to say create like a fork of some kind. Again, maybe I'll do it now. I'm really going to start creating a few twists and turns to create a little variation to this. Now this is way too thick for a branch, so I can one by one say Control A and let go. And you can see I can start to taper this down to get better proportions, better thickness for a branch of some kind. Now remember, we're just establishing basic forms right now. We're going to refine this, create, you see how we've got these straight parts and angled parts. We're going to sculpt away all that stuff to make it look a little more natural and organic. Now I can actually go back to this fork spot, and I can actually extrude off from that to create, again, a fork. So E, and now you can see Very cool. I can start to get a little fork, and I can do a similar thing. Maybe pull out a few, Control A for each of these vertices, excuse me, and start to create a more natural look there. Okay. Now, anytime I want to, I could say marquee and select lots of those, and I could say adjust all those vertices upwards if the trunk was too short, for instance. I could also go back, say, over here, E, and now you can see I'm actually getting a little split or fork to create what I call a sub branch. Maybe I'll just extrude this again, E, and then let go, and then push around. So we're starting to get this nice looking tree right here. Now, some other stuff you'll notice, I've started to turn my view. This whole thing is very straight. Basically, it's all along the z-axis. You can start to move stuff so it's not all kind of planar. Start to make it look a little more natural. Now, you may also want to add in at some point. I've shown you it's easy to just E to extrude out verts along the end. But what if you wanted to, say, put a vertex in between, like along an edge? Here's how you do it. Let's say I want to add a little variation to this trunk. I'm going to select those two verts. So I can click, shift click, then I can just right click and choose this top option, subdivide. And sure enough, I now have a new vert, and I could say, create like a little hint of a bend of some kind there. So that's basically it. What I want you to do is, this is the first part or the first video to establish the form of your creating all the branches, sub-branches, and trunk, and even adding a little bit of variation and control to the thickness.